How would you live if you believed that there was nothing more important than waging war for the one true faith?
They would go to US, to Europe, to other Arab countries. Other Arab countries do not support Hamas's actions.
If there's any such thing as Islamophobia, it comes about because of the behavior of radical Muslims. And if the rest of the Muslims in the world want to do something about so-called Islamophobia, they could do something about the radical Muslims. That's what I'd like to hear about from them.
You get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares. Sitting right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead.
There are two evolutionary reasons that people cooperate, and really this could be true for any creature. One of those reasons is because of shared genes. The other reason is because of reciprocity and the fact that one can profit by partnering with other individuals who bring something valuable to the table. Society can be based on either of these, but for almost the entirety of human history, lineage against lineage competition was the reason for people to group in the way that they did. That has given way to a different mode of collaboration very late in history, the Cosmopolitan West. In the Cosmopolitan West, although we've never achieved it perfectly, we aspire to put our genetic relatedness aside and collaborate with those who are ready to collaborate with us. And the world is caught in a tension between these two modes. The problem is that in good times, this mode of collaboration, Cosmopolitan West, and the reciprocity that it depends on, functions very well. It makes a safer, fairer, more enlightened world. It's one that anyone would desire if they could see the comparison. But the problem is that as times turn to be not so good, it collapses into the much more stable lineage against lineage displacement. And that's where we are. And unfortunately, the Middle East is a flashpoint where this tension is especially likely to kick over into the lineage versus lineage mode and to drag the rest of the world along with it. Something from which I think we might not emerge.
Now to the US, and there again seems to be a preoccupation with Islamophobia, even as Jews are being targeted at university campuses and in major cities across the US. Here is White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre being asked about anti-Semitism, but instead she talks about Islamophobia.
Muslim and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. And certainly President Biden understands that many of our Muslim, Arab Americans and Palestinian American loved ones and neighbors are worried about the hate being directed at their communities. And that is something you heard the president speak to in his address.
Douglas, today I saw footage of Jewish students trapped in a library, not able to leave because there were protesters outside and they feared for their safety. And yet the White House, again, preoccupied with Islamophobia.
Yeah, I saw that same footage, Rita. I also read an account of one of the students these were just Jewish students who had to be locked in a room for their own safety as crowds outside chanted pro-Palestinian slogans. Can you imagine any other community where this would be acceptable? Apparently, by the way, the Jewish students were offered various ways out by some of the college people there, including the possibility they could hide in the attic. You sometimes wonder if anybody has any knowledge of history anymore. Anyway, yes, this is always the norm. It goes back to where we started, Rita. Always the playbook is Jews are murdered by Muslim fanatics. Large majorities of Muslim communities in the West fail to condemn said fanatics. Certain proportions seem to go along with them. Muslims promptly call victim on themselves, and the Jews are blamed. That's the way around. You know, I will guarantee in the days and weeks ahead, there will be no protests of Jews in the West massively targeting Muslim students, for instance, simply for being Muslim. There will not be a campaign of vile harassment on innocent Muslims who happen to be going about their business by large crowds of Jews. But that is the case with Muslims against Jews. And yet it is the Muslims who are still seen as the victims in this situation. And as for the White House, I mean, they just can't decouple these things. They can't just say, look, actually, the statistics such as we have show that Jewish hate crime has massively peaked in all of our countries in the last fortnight, in the last 2 weeks. There has been no massive rise in Islamophobia. But by the way, if they do want to talk about these two things, they could mention the fact that if there's any such thing as Islamophobia, it comes about because of the behavior of radical Muslims. And if the rest of the Muslims in the world want to do something about so-called Islamophobia, they could do something about the radical Muslims. That's what I'd like to hear about from them.
But let me say, if they are able to kill us and abolish the Jewish people of Israel, they will come to you. They will have they wouldn't stop. Do you think this little country of Israel will be enough for them? They would go to US, to Europe, to other Arab countries. Other Arab countries do not support Hamas's actions. They will come to each and every one of your door. They will knock on your door, rape your women, and murder your wife. That's what I have to say.
I have one last question. What do you say to, because after I interview you, I'm also interviewing a mom who's found out that her son is one of the people who were taken hostage. What do you say to family members that are going through that right now? Because I know you went through your own tragedy, having to see friends and people you know shot down, burned alive, and basically just executed right in front of you. But what do you say to those family members that are trying to keep some hope alive that their loved one is going to make it back?
That my heart is with them, and I wish whatever they hope for, because it's a very difficult situation knowing that your little sister is out there being abused in so many ways. I wish for them that what they hope for, what is the best outcome for them, will happen.
What I think we in the West, however you want to conceive it, should do is recognize that we are perpetually at war with aspiring martyrs. Right? We're at war with jihadis. Now, how many people fit in that description actually exist in the Muslim world is as yet undetermined, right? But it's more than we should be comfortable with, and still most Muslims do not fit that description, obviously, right? And then there are kind of concentric circles of decreasing support for the project of jihad. But we have to recognize that we're at war with jihadism. In whatever guise, whatever organization or non-organization it exists in, and we should be killing jihadis, right? That we're not going to negotiate with jihadis. We're not going to live peacefully with jihadis. When you raise your hand and you say I'm a jihadi, that should make your life much more dangerous, officially, from the point of view of the Israelis, the CIA, anyone who's part of this project. So if my thinking has changed about anything, it's the idea that we can do this project of nation building, that, like, by analogy with what we did with, post World War II with Germany and Japan, which are miracles of resurrection, really. I mean, look at the enemies we had in Germany and Japan, and look at the state of the world now, right? I mean, it's just the idea that they are our friends and collaborators, and have been for as long as we've been alive. It's an amazing reboot of civilization after its near destruction. The idea that we can accomplish that in the Middle East and accomplish that in a Muslim culture just because we think everyone must want freedom on some level and must want to run the same democratic code as we do, and dye their fingers and say they voted. I'm much more pessimistic about that project ever being fulfillable in the lifetime of anyone hearing this than I was. And so I think we should be very circumspect about owning anything, because the other thing is that because all of this is seen through a religious lens, on the other side. And it's all a matter of sanctities and their trespass as far as the eye can see. So you bring in infidel troops, even with the best of intentions, to do anything good, and it's a sacrilege worthy of the murder of non-combatants, right? So many people subscribe to this worldview, beyond just jihadists, that you just can't, the project is over with the best of intentions even before it starts. So I mean, even the craziest Christian cults are still just, at their worst, waiting around for the world to end. They're not actively bringing it about. And that's a difference that causes me to sleep better at night.
I love that. Yeah, I know that there's been some concern around that, because if you look back through history, anytime there's ever been some hard, rigid, you must stop doing this religiously, it just turns into a ton of bloodshed, you know. But the reform that has happened, for example, with Christianity, has been very slow, and a lot of people died in the process. You know, we obviously, like you said, Sam, we can't wait around for that. So what do we do? And I think maybe conversations like this, books like what you're doing, the obvious important work that you're doing with ex-Muslims of North America, that's why that is so important, I think, is because I think that's the way we get there, is through education and public discourse.
Yeah. And the point you made, which Majid makes as well, is that if you could just inject 1% of doubt in the mind of someone who would otherwise be a jihadist, you know, that doubt is good, and however you can get it in there, whether it's through a project like yours or a reform project, if you're just left with the feeling that maybe this isn't the perfect path to paradise, that's enough when you're talking about canceling the worst behavior.
I guess I would only disagree to say that I don't think all forms of doubt are the same, in the sense of there's what Majid is sort of aiming towards, which is we just reinterpret things and we put enough doubt in one interpretation that, oh, maybe all these interpretations can be valid, and the interpretation that says that when a man has a right to beat his wife, it actually means he should tickle his wife instead. I mean, if those are not...
Also a bad practice, but arguably not as bad.
Yeah, and Gad was talking about how some are saying that instead of saying, taking the words that say kill, and say, no, kill them with love or kill them with kindness. I think right. These are actual arguments people are making for this Reformation idea.
And I think it's absurd to expect people to take them all seriously, because
and again, I really do think this is a failure of empathy on the part of secular, rational people. They just can't get their heads around what it would be like to actually believe in paradise, right? They've never met, at most they've met people who pretend to believe in paradise. They just don't know what true belief is like, and therefore they can't kind of sympathetically run this particular piece of code and see its perfectly rational implications. I mean, how would you live if you believed that there was nothing more important than waging war for the one true faith and dying in the process? The only straight path to paradise was to be martyred, right? It's the only thing that bypasses the resurrection and all of the uncertainty of whether you're going to get there. It's just like you're just whisked past the velvet rope, and you're in the bottle room with God, waiting for your friends and family to arrive, right? People can't understand what it would be like to actually believe this, and so they think there must be some other motive. So when you read an issue of Dabiq, right, you know, the Islamic State's highly professional newsletter or magazine,
great production quality.
It was shockingly good. I mean, that's
right?
When I commented on it. It was actually a very bad sign that it was as well written and as well copy edited as it was.
They know their stuff.
It was because it shows you the quality of the people they were recruiting from Europe mostly. But it's, and I disagree with the analogy, the genetics analogy you ran, because this is a much shorter piece of code. I mean, the Quran is a much more unified code. I mean, the Quran, there's much less self-contradiction in the Quran than you find in the Bible, right? I mean, the Bible just simply does not present a unified message, and it's very easy to pick and choose and especially if you're a Christian, you wind up with Jesus in his better moods, and you could live a completely benign, pacifist sort of life, or you could be a religious lunatic who's dangerous and divisive. You can sort of have it however you want to have it. It is much harder under Islam. It's not to say this is impossible, and as I said earlier,
Islam is much better designed.
They absolutely need to find their repressor hardware to figure out how to make jihad just a matter of just war and just war theory, as the Christians have it more or less, and spiritual struggle. That would be great. They have to figure out how to do it. It's damn hard to do it, especially when you look at the example of the Prophet Muhammad, who's not a guy who got crucified and told everyone to wait for the end of the world. He was a conquering warlord. I mean, it's like having Genghis Khan as your savior. I mean, it's just not a...
Islam is much better designed, Sam.
For jihad, for holy war.
Got me coming back for more, even when I've been screwed. Dolls full of pins, pierce my heart straight through. I got issues in my head, I like you in my bed, but you keep me on red. Oh, everything is like a test. I better not text or I'll come off desperate.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get sick